And just to recap yesterday, not yesterday, but last Sunday, what did we talk about in that first set of verses there where Solomon had turned from the Lord?
Yeah, because he'd married all them wives.
Yeah.
Seeing all their different religions and kind of going through it, and they were corrupting his heart.
Absolutely. And God had commanded him that he wasn't supposed to take all those wives, right?
Right, it's supposed to be one man, one woman.
One man, one woman. And Solomon kind of fell into his father's footsteps there, didn't he? And wound up taking wives of different origin, different places, and they served other gods other than Israel's God, our God. And so they kind of led Solomon out to the pasture and, so to speak, did the same thing Eve did, said, here, eat, gave him something that a little bit different than what he was used to.
Did he have more than his daddy?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, he had more than David, most definitely.
He made David look
like the same. He started doing what? Going and burning incense to the other...
Worshiping the false gods along with the wives.
Yeah, absolutely. He started worshiping the false gods along with his wives and started going with them and started burning incense to them and everything as well. So we see that he had definitely got off track. So here we see Solomon having some adversaries come up against him. Okay, so we're going to start off right there. Is there someone, Terry, would you read for me there?
Right.
Okay, you probably as bad as I am? Or?
No, just they start calling. Fortunes of Solomon, now the Lord raised up and adversaries against Solomon. Hadad, the Edomite. He was a descendant of the king of Edom. For it happened when David was in Edom, and Joab, the commander of the army, had gone up to bury the slain after he had killed every male in Edom. Because of the 6 months, Joab remained there with all Israel until he had cut down every male in Edom. That had fled to go to Egypt, he and certain Edomites of his father's servants with him. Hadad had still a little child.
Okay, Hold up right there. So why did they go up against all of them? I mean, why did they? Because wasn't this a time of prosperity and stuff for Solomon at one time? During his reign.
So he was getting away from the Lord, and the Lord says, "I'm going to wake you up."
Absolutely. When it's almost like. The analogy of Peter walking on the water tells it all right here too, doesn't it?
Yes.
Like Peter, whenever he had his focus on God, he walked on the water. He had no problem doing that. Jesus said, "Come," and he came.
Yeah.
But then when he took his focus off God, then guess what? That's when turmoil started catching him. He started noticing the stuff around him, which was worldly, and he started to sink. Yeah, absolutely. And I think this was, like Brother Terry said, it was one of the wake-up calls for Solomon. It was coming whether he liked it or not because he had been led astray. And that's just like us. Even our children, we see our children sometimes running with the wrong crowd, and we tell them, hey, look, you're running with the wrong crowd, and no, I got it, and I even did it myself. When you run with the wrong crowd, eventually it catches up with you. God says, okay, time to wake you up, and something happens, and you're part of that crew, and some of them go to jail.
He's saying
or
also
something that somebody else committed, but because they were there, they were a necessary to whatever happened.
I was trying to tell him, I'm here to pick you up, but you got to give it all to me. And at the same time, he's there for you, but the thing is, you got to open that.
God always leaves you an escape. He always leaves you a way to come back.
That brain, you just got to think to the heart, not with the brain.
I'll go ahead and start reading there if you want me to.
Unless, keep going.
Okay, just whenever you Decide you want to stop, let me know.
Midian and came to Paran, and they took men with them from Paran and came to Egypt, to Pharaoh king of Egypt. He gave him a house, a portion of food for him, and gave him land. And Hadad found great favor in the sight of Pharaoh, so that he gave him as wife the sister of his own wife, that is the sister of Queen Tahpenes.
Taphides, yeah.
Then the sister of Tahpenes bore him Ganubah, his son, and Tahpenes reigned in Pharaoh's house, and Ganubah was in Pharaoh's household among the sons of Pharaoh. So when Hadad heard in Egypt that David rested with his fathers, and that Joab, the commander of the army, was dead, Hadad said to Pharaoh, "Let me depart, that I may go to my own country." And Pharaoh said to him, "Well, what have you lacked with me, that suddenly you seek to go to your own country?" So he answered, "Nothing, but let me go anyway." And God raised up another adversary against him, Rezon, the son of Eliada, who had fled from his lord Hadazer, king of Zobah. So he gathered men to him and became over the raiders. When David killed those of Zobah, and they went to Damascus and dwelt there and reigned in
Damascus, yeah.
Damascus.
It's okay.
He was an adversary. He was an adversary of Israel all these days of Solomon. Besides the trouble that Hadad caused, and he
Abhorred?
Israel and reigned over Syria.
Okay. Now you see why I had, because
One of them.
I was like, read? No, I can read, okay. But you did a good job, Terry, very good job, because some of those words really are, hard to pronounce. And, when I'm trying to go over my thing, I sometimes put it on where it would read it to me so I can hear how they're saying it, yeah.
I can do that on my
And even though I do that,
let it read.
yeah, and even though I do that, sometimes I still mispronounce it or whatever. But now we see here that the Lord raised up an adversary against Solomon, Hadad the Edomite, right? So Solomon's reign was glorious, but God did not allow it to be completely without problems. Okay, he raised up adversaries like Hadad against Solomon. It says, when he sent Hiram to assist him in the building of the temple of the Lord, he could say there was no Satan, okay? And that's 1 Kings chapter 5, verse 4. And I'm not sure if I don't think I'm on the right one, so it's not going to pull it up. Anyway, and now having technical difficulties. But anyway, we see that, okay, there it is. But now the Lord my God has given me rest on every side. There is neither adversary nor evil occurrence. So we see that, at that time when Solomon built the temple and Hiram had came down, then everything was good to go. Like I said, that was the last question I had for you guys. Wasn't this during a time of peace? And so, but we see that, because, and I'm with Billy and Brother Terry and Frank and them. I think that once Solomon started allowing these wives and concubines and stuff to lead him astray, God says, you know what? I'm going to, give you a little bit of company, and let's see how well you work with that, So we see that he was a descendant of Hadad was a descendant of the king of Edom, right? Hadad sought to avenge his conquered people. He found refuge and support in Egypt. And to this day, we know that what? Is Egypt an ally of Israel? No. Says, let me depart that I may go to my own country. So he says, we're not told specifically how Hadad troubled or was an adversary to Solomon, only that he returned to bother Solomon with the permission of the Pharaoh. So we see that when God decided to use Hadad, he did what to Hadad? He allowed Satan to use him, right?
Yeah.
Hadad, he put, he wanted to make sure that Hadad was going to be a good adversary, so he allowed Satan to take control of that situation. But it says that God raised up an adversary against him, Rezon, the son of Elidiah, who had fled from his lord, Hadazer, king of Zeboah. So he gathered men to him and became captain over a band of raiders. And when David killed those of Zeboah, they went to Damascus and dwelt there and reigned in Damascus. He was an adversary of Israel all the days of Solomon, besides the trouble that Hadad had caused, and he abhorred Israel and reigned over Syria. So, as a reigning king, Solomon was remarkably successful, but he was not a Superman. As God allowed an adversary from the south, which was Hadad, to harass him throughout the rest of his days, it seems like. It says, as God raised up another adversary against Solomon, God knew that Solomon needed some kind of adversary, and he knew how many adversaries Solomon needed against him. It's like, to me, I want to say it's almost like how God used Job. God knew that, he was not going to allow, that he knew that Job would not turn from him. And so he allowed Satan to do whatever he needed to do except for kill him, right? So, it says, Rezon, the son of Elidiah. This adversary came from the north. God allowed adversaries to come against Solomon from both north and south. And in some ways, men and women are shaped by their adversaries, and especially by their response to those adversaries. So, do you think this was a test as well for Solomon?
Yeah, wake up call.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. It was a wake-up call. It was a test. God is allowing adversaries to come from the north and the south. And God wanted to see how Solomon was going to handle it, didn't he?
Yeah,
Solomon going to reach out to God, or is he going to reach out to one of those false gods?
Absolutely.
I'm thinking he's God's thinking that, okay, let's see how you handle this without me.
Right. Absolutely. Like he's putting him through a test. It says Jeroboam, a special delivery, okay? Jeroboam, the servant of Solomon. Right there where it says, then Solomon's servant Jeroboam, the son of Nebat, and an Ephraimite from Zerediah, whose mother's name was Zariah, a widow who rebelled against the king, and this is what caused him to rebel against the king. Solomon had built the Millo and repaired the damages of the city of David, his father. The man Jeroboam was a mighty man of valor, and Solomon, seeing that the young man was industrious, made him the officer over all the labor forces of the house of Joseph. So Jeroboam was different from two previously mentioned adversaries of Solomon, because he was what? He was an Israelite. Yeah, so he was the same, he was the same from Israel, just like Solomon.
Countryman.
Yeah, countryman, absolutely. It says this is what caused him to rebel against the king. Solomon had built the Millo and repaired the damages of the city of David. It said it is not immediately apparent why these construction projects caused him to rebel against Solomon, but Jewish tradition says he opposed the oppressive use of forced labor in these building projects. Since he was the officer over all the labor forces, this tradition makes some sense. Okay, so he opposed it, but then Solomon did what? Put him over it. It says, according to Dilday, the name Jeroboam means, may the people be great. It says he perhaps was a populist leader. They only presented the people's petition. It is nevertheless probable that Jeroboam was not an idol, but like an artful politician, busy behind the scenes till the coveted crown became his, you know. So it also says that Jeroboam was what? A mighty man of valor, right? It says this made him a more dangerous adversary for Solomon, didn't it?
Yeah, 'cause Solomon had no military training
Or experience. Exactly. He's not been in any of those type of turmoils. Verse 29 right there, we'll start off right there because I had went through, I want to say we read the whole chapter, but we just didn't get to go through it all, right? It says, now it happened at that time when Jeroboam went out of Jerusalem that the prophet Ahijah the Shilonite met him on the way, and he had clothed himself with a new garment, and the two were alone in the field. Then Ahijah took hold of the new garment that was on him and tore it into 12 pieces. And he said to Jeroboam, take for yourself 10 pieces, for thus says the Lord and the God of Israel, behold, I will tear the kingdom out of the hand of Solomon, and I will give 10 tribes to you, but he shall have one tribe for the sake of my servant David, and for the sake of Jerusalem, the city which I had chosen out of all the tribes of Israel. Because they had forsaken me and worshipped Ashtaroth and the goddess of the Sidonians, Chemos, the god of the Moabites, and Milcom, the god of the people of Ammon, and have not walked in my ways to do what is right in my eyes, and keep my statutes and my judgments as did his father David. However, I will not take the whole kingdom out of his hand, because I have made him ruler all of the days of his life for the sake of my servant David, whom I chose because he kept my commandments and my statutes. But I will take the kingdom out of his son's hand and give it to you, 10 tribes. I'm going to stop right there real quick. So God is living up to his expectations, right? He's saying that, hey, Solomon did not follow in his father's footsteps and did not heed his judgments and his commandments. And so therefore, he did what? Took 10 tribes away from him, right? Yep. And but he didn't take it completely out of his hands, right? So we see here that this is going to be another test for Solomon, isn't it? But we see that, he must have been pretty far away from God for God to do that to him. Don't you think?
Very much. Yeah.
He's taking away about, 85, 90%?
About 90% of his, yes. So, it says, take for yourself 10 pieces. In this acted out prophecy, Ahijah showed Jeroboam that he would lead 10 tribes of the divided Israel after the death of Solomon. It was indeed a shock for Rehoboam and the tribe of Judah to be reduced overnight from the most powerful tribe in an illustrious and world-renowned kingdom to a small state that was soon stripped of that wealth it had left. It says, because they have forsaken me. God said that, right? It said, God promised to divide Israel and put 10 of the 12 tribes under Jeroboam as the judgment for the sin and idolatry of Solomon. God would still keep one tribe under the house of David in faithfulness to his promise to David. This is the first we hear of the divided kingdom, which became Israel's history for hundreds of years after the death of Solomon. At this first description, we would expect that the 10 tribes under Jeroboam would be larger, greater, and more enduring than the one tribe left into the house of David. As it worked out, just the opposite happened, because the 10 tribes forsook the Lord, while the one tribe was more obedient. So we'll see that here shortly as well. verse 36, starting there, it says, and, excuse me, and to his son I will give one tribe, that my servant David may also have a lamp before me in Jerusalem, the city which I have chosen for myself to put my name there. So I will take you, and you shall reign over all your heart desires, and you shall be king over Israel. Then it shall be, if you heed all that I command you, walk in my ways, and do what is right in my sight, to keep my statutes and my commandments, as my servant David did, then I will be with you and build for you an enduring house, as I built for David, and I will give Israel to you. And I will afflict the descendants of David because of this, but not forever. Solomon therefore sought to kill Jeroboam, but Jeroboam arose and fled to Egypt, to Shishak, king of Egypt, and was in Egypt until the death of Solomon. So, we see here that he says, I will take you and shall reign over you all that, and you shall reign all that your heart's desires, and you shall be the king over Israel. God ordained this division of Israel and the reign of Jeroboam. He did this as a judgment, right? A great judgment upon Solomon for the embracement of what?
False gods.
False gods, idolatry, right? Absolutely. He says, then I will be with you and build for you an enduring house. This was an amazing offer, wasn't it? God promised to make a lasting dynasty for Jeroboam if he would do right in the sight of the Lord. An obedient Jeroboam had the opportunity to establish a parallel dynasty to the house of David. It says both Jeroboam and David were appointed by God to follow after disobedient kings. David waited upon the Lord to make the throne clear, and God blessed his throne. But Jeroboam did not wait on the Lord, but made his own way to the throne, and God did not bless his reign. So Solomon therefore sought to kill Jeroboam, right? It says, this is another startling evidence of Solomon's decline. God specifically said this would happen after the death of Solomon and in judgment of Solomon's apostasy. So Solomon didn't want to hear it. And he sought to kill Jeroboam. So Solomon thought he could defeat God's will in this, but he was unsuccessful. God's word through Ahijah proved true. We see from 41 to 43 Solomon's death, right? It says, now the rest of the acts of Solomon, all that he did, and his wisdom, are they not written in the book of Acts of Solomon? The period that Solomon reigned in Jerusalem over all Israel was 40 years. Then Solomon rested with his fathers and was buried in the city of David, his father, and Rehoboam, his son, reigned in his place. It says the period that Solomon reigned in Jerusalem over all Israel was 40 years. It says many commentators believe that Solomon's reign began his reign when he was about 20 years old. It says this means that Solomon did not live a particularly long life. This means that the promise made in 1 Kings chapter 3 verse 14 was not fulfilled to Solomon because of his disobedience. And that promise was, it says, so if you walk in my ways, keep my statutes and my commandments as your father David did when he walked, then I will lengthen your days. So evidently that did not happen because he was probably about 60 years old when he passed.
Because back then it was still pretty old.
Yeah, absolutely. But I want to probably say that he probably didn't take very good care of himself. Because of the fact that, it's like Jackie said, he didn't have any military experience, so he probably didn't have to stay in shape. And he had all that money, and everybody bringing you spices and food and all that stuff, so he probably...
Physically, he didn't have to do nothing.
Physically, he didn't have to do anything.
But doesn't it sound like there's a lot of the rulers through the Bible that when they stopped following God and they started doing something else, that their reign was always 40 years?
Yeah, it didn't last much longer than that. says, however, it may be that Solomon was shown special mercy for the sake of David his father. If that promise also applies to Solomon as well as the Messiah. So some also believe that Solomon wrote the book of Ecclesiastes at the very end of his life as a renunciation of his fall into vanity. And you can just about see that, you know. I would think 9 times out of 10, at the very end of Solomon's life, he got some clarity, you know, because he saw that he was being attacked from the north and the south, and he knew that was, after all these years, you know, having so much, you know, given to him and stuff like that, he knew that it was going to, you know, come eventually. But one thing that he didn't do that his father David did, and what was that? Anybody?
What do you mean?
One thing that Solomon didn't do that David did.
David stayed faithful to the Lord.
Lord, yes, right, yeah.
How many wives and stuff he had.
But when David had attacks upon him, what did he do?
He went to the Lord.
He went to-
Yeah.
Yeah, he went to the Lord and he asked the Lord, you know, Lord, what shall I do? You know, what shall I do now? You know.
And he always says that you will for these people to,
Yeah, what is your will? Not my will, but what is your will for your people?
is this my curse, you know, is it your will for these people to take over us, or
Yeah.
am I gonna get to win?
Right. And he always put God first. But there again, there were times when David strayed, you know, we know that. But, you know, David always came back to the Lord, it seemed like.
Well, Solomon's a good example of David's straying.
Very much.
Yes, absolutely.
Yep.
Yes, we know that, yes, Solomon is a good example of that. And that, you know, and that might have been one of the reasons why Solomon strayed like he did, you know, because genetically he was like, you know what, I'm gonna be like my dad. You never know. But however, we see that, you know, like I said in 2 Samuel chapter 7, verse 14 and 15, it said, I will be his father, and he shall be my son. If he commits iniquity, I will chasten him with the rod of men and with the blows of the sons of men. But my mercy shall not depart from him, as I took it from Saul, whom I removed from before you. So this is, you know, God talking about David. So I think, you know, the mercies that he showed David, he showed upon Solomon as well. Let's see here. It said, some also believe that, again, that Solomon wrote the book of Ecclesiastes at the very end of his life as a renunciation of his fall into vanity, and surely it had been better for Solomon to have been buried alive than thus to have miscarried in his old age, and to the great dishonor of God and the offense of the people of Israel. That was said by Trap, the God. But as we see here at the latter parts of Solomon's life, it wasn't hunky-dory like it had been all those years, was it? No?
Excuse me.
An example of you reap what you sow.
What'd you say, Jackie?
It's an example of you reap what you sow.
Yes. We see that it said that he was going to take it away from Solomon, but not forever, right? It says this statement implied that the kingdom was not to be permanent, and that David's house would ultimately rule all the tribes of Israel. And though the prophecy was private, the king heard about it, and Jeroboam became a marked man when Solomon found out. It says, guilty in Solomon's eyes of rebellion and worthy of the death penalty. And so that's why.
You napkin?
And that's why.
I'll do it.
I need one.
So. It says Shishak, and this is one that I didn't know. It says Shishak was the founder of the 22nd dynasty in Egypt. He reigned from 945 to 924 BC. He invaded Judah during the reign of Rehoboam. So, again, we see a war, you know.
Yep.
The next, bless you. So next Sunday we're going to talk about the revolt against Rehoboam. Now we know that Rehoboam took over after Solomon. So we will see kind of revolt up against Rehoboam and in chapter 12. And any questions on chapter 11? I know it was kind of a long chapter. We got through some of it last week and then, followed up on the rest of the chapter this week. You guys have any questions on Solomon and his reign during the time that he reigned?
Well, if we look in the history, it passed down like a fire stick through the routine as to the direction from each king passed down to another, the same habits that they took sinning against the Lord.
Right.
In the sense, when there was one king that's coming up you're going to talk about. I won't mention it, but that's coming.
Yeah. I know that most definitely, some of the stuff that they experienced back then, the devil still uses against us today.
This was, very much.
Use Solomon. How many people out there do you know that are being harassed by the devil? They're married and they're getting tempted by other women or other men. The wives being tempted by men and the men being tempted by other people's wives or something. He uses that, or he uses the lust of the flesh. And lies. Makes you think that the grass is greener on the other side when there's nothing but a big old septic tank up underneath that grass.
Good example.
So, and here we see that Solomon, let those wives lead him astray, So, almost an idolatry state where he disobeyed God's command. And God told him before his reign, what? That if you do like your dad did, my servant David, and not disobey me, I will do this for you. So we saw the unraveling. So with that being said, if we don't have anything else, Brother Frank, close us in a word of prayer, please.
Dear Heavenly Father, we do thank you once again for this day and being listened, Lord. We thank you for this lesson that's been brought forward.
Yes.
And we thank you for everything that you've done for us. We do ask again that you put your hands upon the spoken and the unspoken prayer requests. Be with us as we go into psalm service and the preaching later, and keep us safe as we go our appointed ways and bring us back at the appointed hour. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.
Amen.